It's absolutely logical that he must be afraid that European countries and the Americans will send their soldiers to Ukraine under certain conditions. Since the end of the last year, Macron began to come to the idea that it is necessary to increase the military presence and, let's say, formalize the military presence of France, and not only in Ukraine.
Hello and welcome to Ukraine in Flames, a special project by Ukraine Media Center, an NGO Euro-Atlantic course, and I'm your host, Myroslava Yaremki. French President Emmanuel Macron called public fears about the possible deployment of troops to Ukraine a necessary wake-up call. I think it is important that our youth understand what the essence of the conflict in Ukraine is. It is happening 1,500 kilometers from our borders, which is not so far, said the French leader during a visit to Marseille. According to him, the outcome of the conflict and any decision to abandon Ukraine by partners would directly impact France. In today's episode, we're going to talk about how Western allies have responded to recent statements by Macron and what potential involvement of French troops in Ukraine might entail. If you want to learn more about this subject, please continue watching this video and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss our videos in the future. Macron's remarks regarding the potential deployment of troops to Ukraine have upset some allies, notably the Americans, who privately expressed concerns about the risk of provoking a confrontation with Moscow. Macron's suggestion of troop deployment aimed to make Vladimir Putin ponder its likelihood, but officials familiar with NATO's discussions on Ukraine suggest it may have had the opposite effect. By compelling Germany to publicly reject sending troops to Ukraine, Macron effectively clarified allies' red lines, dispelling ambiguity. More on demonstrating such strategic transparency that encourages the enemy, please welcome Executive Director of the NGO Euro-Atlantic course, Ihor Seletskyi.
In foreign policy, there is such a thing as strategic uncertainty. It is when your opponent, your enemy, must not know what you plan or can do. Putin very often uses this tactic, strategy, whatever you call it. Whether he uses nuclear weapons or not, whether he starts hostilities against the Baltic countries or not, whether he declares war on Moldova or not, the West is in a state of uncertainty on these issues. That's why I was quite surprised when, after Macron's words, all European countries and the Americans began to throw up a white flag of strategic transparency and shout, "No, our soldiers will never fight in Ukraine." But it's just, I use a soft word instead of a hard word, it's just stupid. Putin must always be afraid of using it. It must be a threat to him. Instead of demonstrating such strategic transparency to the enemy and saying you can do whatever you want there, our soldiers won't be there, that's one thing I wanted to say. It's absolutely logical that he must be afraid that European countries and the Americans will send their soldiers to Ukraine under certain conditions. Another important thing I want my listeners to understand is this. This concept of Western society and elites that it isn't our war and we are just helping Ukraine is totally wrong. This is our common war. World War III is already underway. It is waged by hybrid methods all over the world, including against European countries and the US, and with real tools of war in Ukraine. But for Russia, the Houthis wouldn't have woken up and Hamas wouldn't have attacked Israel. It's obvious that the task of Russia and autocracy is chaos. Chaos in Europe. This is the second thing I wanted to say. And the third, in fact, it isn't necessary to fight. There are very simple, obvious ways. For example, if a French contingent is stationed on the border between Belarus and Ukraine, and we aren't at war with Belarus, we aren't attacked from that side, everything is calm there, then Ukraine can free, I'm not a military person, I don't know, 100,000 people from that border or 50,000, and can use them on the Eastern Front against Russia. This is also help. You won't fight, your soldiers won't fight in hot spots on the front line, and they will simply control the border. And the probability that the Belarusians will go against the French contingent is minimal, just minimal, 0.0 of a percent. But Ukraine will receive additional resources, and this is no disaster either. And the last thing I'd like to say is about Putin's nuclear blackmail, which everyone is so afraid of. He must understand that the nuclear threat, which has already been realized, is no longer a threat. It is simply not a threat. That's why Putin will never do it, because then the West must respond by any methods, respond seriously. If it doesn't, then you will simply open the door for Putin. He will blackmail you all, give up the Baltics first, then Poland, then whatever. And Putin also understands that the West will respond. And nuclear threat is a threat until it is not realized. A realized nuclear threat is no longer a tool for Putin.
French newspaper Le Figaro cites 5 possible scenarios for the development of events in the matter of French assistance to Ukraine. First possible scenario is that France will build new weapon factories in Ukraine. Second, the French military will train the defense forces in Ukraine. Third, France concentrates on the defense of the port of Odessa in order to avoid a sharp rise in world grain prices and the spread of the conflict to Moldova. Fourth, French troops create buffer zones around the perimeter of Ukraine, which is at war. And fifth, French combat units join Ukrainian units and take part in hostilities. According to the publication, the last scenario in which French troops fight with the Russian army is very unlikely. This would be equivalent to declaring war on the Russian Federation. People's Deputy of Ukraine and President of the PACE Committee on Migration, Refugees and Displaced Persons, Oleksii Honcharenko, will elaborate more on this live from Paris.
So you remember, in the last few weeks, Macron said troops. There are a lot of things going on around this. There are also some fakes, but in fact, everyone agreed that Macron was talking about some symbols, symbolically giving a signal to Putin, and all this is important. Friends, I am recording this video from Paris, where I currently chair the Committee on Refugee Migration at the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, but beside this I actively communicated with my French colleagues and clarified the information. And friends, now I will tell you almost sensational information. So everything Macron said was very serious. Once again, this is all very serious. Since the end of the last year, Macron began to come to the idea that it is necessary to increase the military presence and, let's say, formalize the military presence of France, and not only in Ukraine. Their goal is assistance. That is, it is not about the fact that French troops will enter into battles with Russian ones, and France will simply directly enter the war against Russia. Today there is no talk about this. I emphasize, today there is no talk about this. Today it is about organizing training on the territory of Ukraine. Like, our people are leaving and are being trained in France and Germany, but it's all complicated. When they leave, they need to provide a lot of documents, etc. But here, on the contrary, a more active training will be organized within Ukraine, and it will be conducted by French instructors, and not only French ones. I'll add more about this now. They will provide their cybersecurity experts, as well as assistance at military-industrial enterprises. The northern border, that is the border of Ukraine and Belarus. So in general, they will help do everything possible to free up as many Ukrainian forces as possible to fight the aggressor. And the French forces and the military can help, teach, and gain experience themselves. They will provide assistance with air defense. In general, there will be a whole range of directions and ideas. How will it work? Different options are discussed here, and now there is an active work in this. The military are working. Once again, these are not words, not political statements. The military of the general staffs of France, other countries, and of course Ukraine are now working and discussing that what this might look like. Maybe either some kind of designated place, roughly speaking, a base, or the representation of French forces in different sectors. And not only French ones. France sees a coalition of several countries. These could be the Baltic countries, Scandinavian countries, Poland, the Czech Republic, Canada. A number of countries have considered the possibility of participating in this, but under the auspices and leadership of France. This, I repeat, is actually sensational information. And perhaps I wouldn't even talk about it, but yesterday this Russian Naryshkin started talking about it and talk about the contingent. And there is indeed one word contingent in this context. A French contingent may appear on the territory of Ukraine. Once again, the contingent of people who do not take part in the hostilities, but who help and who are the military.
You've been watching a special project by Ukraine Media Center in Euro-Atlantic course dedicated to the Russian-Ukrainian war, Ukraine in Flames. In the description under this video, you can find information on how you can help Ukraine fight Russian aggression. If you find our work useful, please like and share this video. Slava Ukraini!